so glad to have you back. I'm wired on my coffee, I'm wired on my protein shake, and I'm just so excited to have you here this Wednesday. We're going to make this show just, I want the energy to this show. I want all of the American people who tune in from California to Indiana to Ohio to Florida to New York. My audience just loves truth and the kitchen table discussions that are really affecting the hearts and minds of our next generation, and also what are affecting our families. And I was looking at all the news stories that you have received and the news coverage you've received on your amazing book since we talked last. I'm so excited for you. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
How are things going, first and foremost?
I think quite well. It's being very well received. We've gotten a few good reviews of it, and I think it's not a hard message to sell to most Americans that we should unite and be together and get along. So despite what politicians tell you, we're all one country, and we should all love each other and get along. That's actually a pretty easy message to sell to most people.
It is a very easy message. And I was looking at your interview on medium.com, and I was looking at some of the interview questions that they presented to you. And I'm looking at my phone to the notes I took and the pictures I highlighted. I wanted to kind of go backwards with you a second on some of the things that I was really struck by. What are 5 steps that each one of us can take to proactively help unite our country? First, let me say this. Who would have thought we would have to even come to this point?
Yes, exactly. It's really remarkable. Not that we've done everything perfectly in the past, but at least the ideal has always been to unite as a single group.
And that's exactly it.
We've gone backwards.
We have. When do you think that really started for us and going backwards? I've heard many of your interviews. You cite the late 80s going into the 90s, but do you think it goes even farther back?
Yeah, I think certainly when it comes to ethnicity, Jimmy Carter was the first one to really articulate this sort of multicultural vision.
Mm-hmm.
He literally said, "I don't see us as a melting pot. I see us as a mosaic." So that was in the 1970s, and it didn't really take hold until a little while after that. But he was kind of the first one to articulate that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can go all the way back to the beginning of the 20th century, and there were a couple of characters, Horace Callan, for example, who was a philosopher. He wrote in The Nation back in 1915 that he didn't believe in the melting pot. But those were sort of fringe characters at the time. It wasn't really until the 70s and 80s that the notion of multiculturalism caught hold.
Well, here are a couple things that you cited, 5 steps that each one of us can take to proactively unite our country now. But I want to go back again. I just read a news report just moments ago in the New York Post that Meta, whatever you want to call it, Facebook, letting go 10,000 people. And they call it the Hunger Games. And in this article, it talks about how social media companies and partisan media companies continue to make money off of creating a split in our society. And I kind of chuckled at myself seeing that that's about to happen to them. Is it finally turning against them what they have been doing for so many years to try and divide this nation with the social media antics that they do?
I'd like to think that it's that way. It might not be. I think, as you know, I worked for many years in the high-tech world.
Yes.
And one thing I always speculated about, and Elon Musk actually realized, is that a lot of tech companies really only need a few people. There aren't that many people in a company like Meta or any of these other ones, Twitter, for example, where people are indispensable. And Elon Musk really showed that. He took out 80% of the company, and for all I can see, Twitter operates better than it did before. So I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley were looking around saying, wow, we have a lot of people who don't do anything. So it's probably a little more of that than that people are moving away from from those platforms.
Mhm. Well, let me ask you, let's go back a couple years and in the 2020 election and you see, or 2016, let's even go back then, talk a little bit of politics here and the division in the United States specifically. So 2016, the glass ceiling shatters and it's not Hillary, it's Trump. 2020, everybody argues it could be one way or the other, Dominion voting systems, et cetera, et cetera. You know, you see, I call him Oh Biden, he gets in. And then you continue to see a destruction that's happening currently. And you don't have to say this, but I'm going to specifically target this current administration because there is a huge break down the middle. And you can see it in our backyards. I'm pointing to my backyard right now in our house. You can see it in the backyards of our communities and our nation. And that huge distinction, talk to me about that timeline. Do you think in that time period, 2016, 2020 to currently now, do you think it has been an increase of division because of elected leaders, or do you think it's been a combination of social media, of the elected leaders, of politics playing a huge role? What are your thoughts, and what's that chemistry? What's the equation to that?
Well, I can mostly address the issue of ethnic and racial divisions.
Yeah.
And one of the things we saw with this administration coming in is that they made very clear that certain positions were going to be filled on the basis of race, gender, ethnicity, which isn't that incredible? I mean, technically that's illegal, right?
Yes.
Civil
Yes.
rights law doesn't allow that. Yet
Right.
here, we have a Supreme Court justice where one category was selected and no others need apply. That's just remarkable. And you can criticize the Obama administration and previous ones, but I don't think anyone has got quite that explicit about having race and ethnicity be a precondition for employment. To me, that's an enormous step backwards in our country's ethnic relations.
So, as you just said, it's an enormous step backwards. So, what do we need to do to put that step forward to change the scope? Because these culture wars are getting worse and worse. Every day I turn on my radio, and I still love radio. I listen to my radio host WABC and 990 AM Philadelphia, and I hear them talk about, shootings here, shootings here, shootings here. What's next? High crime. All of these things that are happening, and what is it going to take us to go on a step forward in the direction that this content, this mentality, this division could kind of take a step back?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to the broader culture wars, but what I can say certainly when it comes to race, ethnicity, those sort of issues, I think the solution is to just be focusing relentlessly on the fact that we are all one group, that Black Americans, Latino Americans, we're all one group, and we all share citizenship. And I honestly think a lot of the other divisions we're seeing stem from that because once you go past that concept of being a single group, the splintering just goes further and further. Each splinter divides again, and you don't just divide 2 or 3 times; you start to divide 1,000 times. And so it really takes a return to that notion that we're all part of the same country.
No, and that's what I absolutely love about it. Some of the articles I read and that Maria had sent over to me showed the picture of the Statue of Liberty, and it reminded me of Ellis Island and the historical aspects of Ellis Island. My family, my great grandparents followed each other over to come over to Ellis Island from Hungary for freedom, for a better life, for opportunity to start a family business, to raise a family, et cetera, et cetera. And they were a part of that melting pot. And it wasn't check at the door, okay, woman, male, transgender, whatever. It was welcome to America, assimilate into America, because they wanted that. Do you?
Yeah.
So talk to me about that, because I know your father. You said you grew up in Germany, correct?
No, actually, my father came from Germany. I
Okay.
spent several years there as well.
Mhm.
I was actually born in the United States, but we went back over there. And yeah, my father came here and was quickly adopted into this country. He learned English. He became a citizen within 2 years, and nobody held his origins against him. And
Mhm.
I'm not going to say that things were perfect back in the 60s and going back earlier. Obviously the Irish were really discriminated
Yes,
against,
they were.
but that's become completely irrelevant. My wife is from an Irish family. Nobody even thinks about it. My other in-laws are from Italy, or you can go around the globe. And
Mhm.
all of these divisions that maybe 100 years ago were a big deal have kind of faded.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't have thought twice about marrying an Irish girl. It wasn't even a consideration, right? It's not something
Mhm.
you think about. But now, again, with the current way we're going, we're
Mhm.
kind of going back in that direction, though, that we're going back towards siloing people according to their group.
Hmm. Well, one thing that you said about the Irish Catholics, I mean, John F. Kennedy, first Irish Catholic president, and that was huge back during that time period. And now we look at, we have the first female vice president, as she identifies as Black. So are we going to continue to progress? I wonder, it was the Irish Catholic back then. Now it's, that aspect of a female Black vice president. Can you predict with, as you've been studying this for so long, what do you think it'll be in like 10 years? What are your initial thoughts?
I think it depends a lot on what course we take right now. If we continue
Mhm.
down the path of the longer term path that we've had for the last 100 years of
Mhm.
trying to make differences in origin less and less relevant,
Mhm.
then things will get better and better. If we follow the course that has been set out over the last few years, the last dozen, 20 years, uh, then we could have a problem. Then we start to look a lot like Yugoslavia did a couple of decades ago, or like India does,
Mhm.
where people are just relentlessly distinguished by group.
Mhm.
And there are really bad signs of that. I've told this story once or twice before, but I got the schedule for a debate tournament my son is going to. And,
I saw that on Twitter. I was just about to ask you about that.
yeah, and the schedule is incredible, and I should put it at the top of my Twitter feed, because the entire first day, right, the whole first day is devoted to ethnically segregated meetings. It's like 9 a.m. for BIPOC, 10 a.m. for Latinx, and it goes all the way up to 4 p.m., all the way up to 4 p.m. for Islanders.
Mhm.
And I look at that schedule and I say, when is the meeting for those of us who believe we're all Americans and we're all one group? I didn't see that meeting on the schedule. It
Mhm.
was all just divided up. And if we continue down that route of having segregated meetings, having segregated graduations, which you look across the country, Columbia has 7 different separate graduation ceremonies. Um, I think another university has 6. Stanford has several. Um,
That's expensive when you sit there and think about it.
yeah, to have all those different ceremonies, and more than just the cost, but the message it sends
Yes.
is just incredible. So if you think of the Brown versus Board of Education,
Right.
where separate but equal was thrown out. Justice Earl Warren, he said in that ruling that if we segregate out, if we separate out Black children from other students, even if they get the same facilities, that will impart to them a feeling of inferiority that they will have a hard time overcoming in their lifetimes. And so what are we doing today? We're doing
Right.
exactly what
Exactly.
Justice Earl Warren said was a big mistake and that would cause irreparable damage,
Yes.
separating them out. And you can see it in the increase in crime, the increase in racial
Yes.
incident.
Yes.
Um, one of the most dangerous things you can do is take a set of people and divide them into groups. And
Mhm.
especially if you pit those groups against each other in a competition for resources or attention or whatever.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things my book shows around the world. Anytime you do that, you end up with really bad results.
Mhm.
So that's the path we've been going down on, for the last decade or so here, and it's a really dangerous one. And this isn't. I don't even see this as a left or a right thing. The
Mhm.
Justice Earl Warren, as you know, was
Yep.
very much a liberal,
Yes, he was.
and a lot of the things I'm saying right now, and a lot of things I say in my book, Arthur Schlesinger,
Yes.
who's an
Yes.
icon
Yep.
of the liberal left, was writing the same things back in 1992. He wrote this wonderful book. It was called The Disuniting of America. And he said pretty much what I'm saying today. And this is a Kennedy cabinet guy.
Yes, he is. Yes, he was.
And so again, it's not a right or left thing. And I'm hoping everybody will realize that
Mhm.
it's an American thing. And if we don't get it together, we're looking at the path that Yugoslavia took. Maybe not quite that bad, but the bottom line is a divided society does not work well. When people
Yeah. Well, I was just going to ask you if you could, for a lot of those who aren't maybe familiar with what happened during Yugoslavia, talk to us a little bit about what happened and what were some of the things that happened there you're seeing happen here and compare the
Yeah,
parallels.
so in Yugoslavia after World War II, I mean, it had a long tradition of having different groups. But after World War II, for a while, Tito, who's not one of my favorite characters, but he got this one thing right. He decided that the country needed to be unified, that all these different groups, he said, they needed to become like the lions in a marble column. So one single column with just these faint lines in it. And he actually launched a whole set of initiatives, like a group works project across the whole country, where
Mhm.
different groups worked together and kind of came to see themselves as being united.
Mhm.
And that went really, really well. And if you talk to anybody from Yugoslavia, they refer to that as a kind of a golden era. And Tito, in fact, cited the American melting pot as an example he wanted to follow. Well, about a decade or two later, they changed course. They
Mhm.
decided instead that they were going to foster separate Croatian, Serbian, Bosnian,
Mhm.
Albanian identities. And they explicitly passed laws that said that if you were an Albanian, you had a right to be educated in Albanian wherever you lived, even if you lived in Serbia. Uh, and topping that off, they passed a affirmative action program that designated how many people of each group could say attend a university, or how many people of each group could be at certain levels of the military. And that really started the path down to the groups seeing each other as separate.
Mhm.
And then it went from there. We had the war between Serbia and Croatia. We had the Bosnian genocide. It was a disaster, and it really all began with that designation of people as being different groups and their affirmative action program.
Mhm.
This is repeated around the world.
Yeah.
Similar thing happened in Sri Lanka. Similar thing happened in Rwanda.
Right.
Um, in India to this day, they have riots over their affirmative action programs there. India has 49% of their seats in higher education are reserved for members of specific ethnic groups.
Whether they are of merit or of integrity or of any kind
Yeah,
of foundation.
individual traits don't matter. And the question with these programs, particularly in India and Malaysia, where they've been around for even longer than ours, 60, 70 years. Some of these programs have been around. The question is, if they're so effective at equalizing people, why do we still need them after 70 years? You can ask that about the United States too. If affirmative action is such a great solution, why is it still needed after 50 years? Sounds to me like it's not working.
Well, I was going to ask you this as you were describing everything that's been happening. I kept thinking the word control, the word control. And it comes across to me as you were describing it, that it is, again, that authoritarian mentality, that control to separate these people groups to be in control. You go here, you go here, you go here, similar to the university segment that you talked about.
Absolutely. When you're on top, the best way to secure your power and make sure that people don't get around you is to divide up the people below you, because that way they can't overturn you or they can't swap you out for somebody else. So
Right.
when you divide people up, it gives you, as an administrator, as a politician, it gives you more power, and it secures your spot. And this again is something you see throughout history. So in Yugoslavia, one particular character, Slobodan Milosevic, that's precisely what he did. He's a terrible guy, terrible politician. People didn't like him, but he was so adept at exploiting that group division that it made him powerful. And you can see that on a small level with university admissions officers. If admissions were based on tests and grade scores, those officers wouldn't have any power, would they?
No.
Because all they could do is say, okay, here are the best candidates, we'll take them. And in fact, a lot of those administrators wouldn't have a job. They get their power from saying, oh, I'm going to take somebody from this group and from that group, and we're going to take a holistic approach that takes people's race and their ethnicity into account.
It so much resembles what I see coming from the Oval Office.
Yeah, it does, and that's precisely what they did with their Supreme Court nomination and so many other cabinet nominations.
Yes.
Even the press secretary.
Yes.
It was very clear that she was chosen not because of individual merits, but because of the groups that she was born into.
Yes. Yeah. As a communications professional, having served members of Congress and the United States president, she is an embarrassment to the communications community. From my standpoint, I take that with high pride and integrity. And when I sit there and look at that and say, this is not a communications professional, this is not what I would put in front of the press corps, for instance, or to represent a sitting United States president. So I could go on a tangent, but I digress. I also want to talk to you. We have about 6-7 minutes left, but I also want to talk to you. And I highlighted it when I started off, but in the state of mind that this nation is in, you highlight 5 steps that each one of us can take to proactively unite our country. But I also take it another step to proactively unite our communities.
Yes.
Talk to me about those 5 steps.
A lot of what those 5 steps are about is just stepping back and remembering that we're all a single group. And also I talk about seeing things from the other person's perspective. And I think that is important for us to do. And one of the steps I threw in there was kind of a crazy one, but I kind of do believe it is, just step outside of your shoes for like a week or two.
Yeah.
And try to make all the arguments for the people that you're opposed to. Take their stand and argue it as vociferously as you can. And Milton Friedman actually came up with this formulation. He said, if you're going to take a stand on something, the only way you can know that you're right is to know the arguments of the other side better than they do themselves. And that's part of what I had in mind here. You put yourself in their shoes, try to make all their arguments, and if nothing else, you'll at least develop a sympathy for their point of view and understand why they think they do. And I think for some of us, this might be kind of hard, but I think it's a worthwhile exercise for people on both sides of all sorts of conflicts.
As you describe that scenario, I am honored to have many Turning Point USA university students on this show, or high school students. And they have shared with me when they have had their tables up at certain universities, whether it's in Freedom, Florida, or in a more liberal blue state, if you will, they have been approached by the other side, tipping over their table and wanting to create a video ruckus.
Yeah.
And that is unfortunately, that doesn't do anything but just stir the pot, and it really doesn't have that dialogue with both sides to really engage. And and the Turning Point University students, I'm so proud of them because they rise above. They are the cream of the crop, and how they approach things and how they respond to things is with that communication, that content. And they have shared with me, they have been able to actually educate students who are thinking completely in that just such distorted way, to say, this is actually, here are the facts. This is the policy. This is what has taken place. And just to, that community bringing, as you said, walking in their shoes, but then being able to have that dialogue and that content. I've just been so proud of them for being able to do that, especially the ones I've worked with here in North Carolina and Virginia and Florida. But on that note, it's something that the college students are setting a tone that we, the mature adults here, not the new adults, need to be challenging ourselves in when we go out into our communities day to day. And that is that engagement piece. What are the other steps that you recommended? I saw community planting a tree and doing some other things, but what are some other steps that you would highly recommend?
Well, one of my most basic ones is whoever you're talking with, whoever you deal with every single day, and particularly the people you don't get along with, try to make them smile, right?
I love it.
It's so basic. Whatever grumpy person you see at the front door of your office every day, just make them smile, and you'd be surprised. All of a sudden you do that, and you realize, and they realize, the sort of fellowship we all have as fellow human beings, and just take the time to stop and do that for different people every day, and especially focus on the ones you don't get along with. If you can make somebody who opposes you politically on every single issue, if you can make them laugh or smile, boy, that just does wonders.
I completely agree with you. When I was on the campaign trail, I was out meeting with constituents, and a lady I met, as soon as she heard who I had previously worked for, she shut me off.
Yeah.
And the thing was, I didn't go on this mode. I went on, okay, let me love on her. Let me understand where she's coming from. And the thing was, she couldn't explain why she felt the way she did, other than it was just pure anger and hate almost. And at the end of that conversation, she was talking with me and not screaming at me. And she finally smiled. But it was that kindness and just that level-headed conversation. And a lot of people won't be able to do that, but I was thankful that I was able to, because I had teenagers around me who I mentor and who were helping me on the campaign trail, and they were watching this interaction. And I knew it wasn't just about me, but it was about how do it's almost like, how did I minister to her? How did I show her love?
Exactly. And what you were doing is modeling for these younger people as well, so they could see that, which is just wonderful. I think that's fantastic, and that's what we all need to do. And just stop for a minute and realize that, yes, we do disagree with these people maybe on a lot of issues, but if we can just engage and smile and get them to smile, again, one of the things I loved about Milton Friedman so much is that he could argue with people who were absolutely opposed to him, but he did it with such a sense of humor and grace that
Mhm.
sometimes, people would gradually come over to his side, or at least, if nothing else, there was a warmth and an understanding between them that wouldn't be there otherwise.
And perhaps that is what we need, stepping aside from the social media wars, stepping aside from the political wars, and having a community where you re-engage and just hear one another, listen to one another, talk to one another, see the expressions and not be behind a text message.
Yes, absolutely. And I did mention, as you said, one of the other items I had in that list was
Mhm.
for all of us to, try to get out and work on community type projects together.
Mhm.
There is nothing like working together on something as a team with, people you might not normally disagree with, that again, you find that sense of fellowship.
Mhm.
I think I gave the example of Rwanda in
Mhm.
there, what they did after the genocide. They have this program, they call it Umuganda, which the last Saturday of every month, the entire country turns out in the morning. I mean, every single adult in the country, all the politicians, business leaders, and they work together on cleaning up litter, on planting trees, just doing stuff together. And that tradition, which they've now had for the last 25 years, has made tremendous strides in just making people there feel like they're all on the same team.
Mhm. And do you think that's what it's going to take for our country, the United States of America, to have that patriotism yet again? I mean, patriotism runs, I am red, white, and blue, blood, red, white, and blue. But you see that patriotism for the United States, it's diminished within some generations. Do you think that's what's going to take to reestablish that patriotism and pride of the United States?
I think it will. And, a lot of people have talked about having like a national service program, for
Mhm.
example, that might address that. And you and I both know, because I think I mentioned in that article that I went to military-based schools
Yes.
as a kid,
Yes.
and there's a tremendous unifying element in the military, because everybody's working together on the same thing, and it's shared goals.
Mhm.
And when you can bring people of different backgrounds together to work on shared goals, the effect is tremendous. I mean, it
Mhm.
has a way of uniting people who are otherwise completely different and have completely different ways of seeing things. And that's what happened with the Rwandans with their Umuganda,
Mhm.
same idea. So, certainly encourage more young people to enter the military
Yes.
as
Yes.
a step, and maybe those who can't because of disability or whatever other reasons, that for them there's a national service program where they go for 2 years and work on projects together, kind
Mhm.
of like the CCC, um, during the Depression.
Mhm.
Do that for 2 years, and in exchange they get money for college or money to start
Mhm.
a business.
Mhm. Well, and also similar to the Peace Corps and things of that nature,
Exactly.
but no, I completely agree with you. This country needs more than ever to bring back that generation, the greatest generation. And this next generation has that opportunity to be that next greatest generation.
Yeah.
And with the retirees and veterans like my husband who were in Iraq and Afghanistan, they can speak into the young minds and lives to instill in them the pride of country, the pride of service. And that really goes right back to the power of your book. It really does.
Yeah, it's we really are at a juncture where we can decide to go one way or another, and we can either start working together and becoming a single country, which was our long-term trajectory. That's what we
Mhm.
were doing for so many years.
Mhm.
Or, the alternative is we go down the path of more and more division. And
Yes.
I'm not saying that, this country is going to have genocide like they did in Yugoslavia or Rwanda, but what does happen when you lack that sense of unity, people just, they don't make all the little sacrifices that make a society work,
Mm-hmm.
both large and small. Just all the, the communal and civic contributions that people do,
Mm-hmm.
and you end up with a society that looks more like India or Nigeria or Brazil. These very, very divided societies where there's lots of crime, and the streets are filthy, because nobody cares. They're all focused on their own little group.
Mm-hmm.
That,
Let me ask you a final question before we wrap this amazing podcast this morning. Maria, thank you for setting this up. I absolutely adore Maria. Talk to me about, I have your Twitter account going at the very bottom, but where are you going to be? What's up next for you? I know that she has you booked all over the place and you are just busy as all get out, but where can we follow you, find you? What, do you have any articles coming out, and the book tour as a whole?
Yeah, so the articles I'll certainly put out on my Twitter and LinkedIn account. So that's probably the best place to follow those.
Okay.
And actually, I'm in New York City right now. So
How fabulous.
in a hotel room. So we have a book launch party tonight at Encounter Books. Maria will be there.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
So,
That would be fabulous. Book launch parties are so much fun,
yeah.
especially doing it from New York City. Oh, what better place to do it? So you'll be doing a book launch at Encounter Books, and what else do you have?
And then I have a lot more radio show and podcast interviews scheduled.
Okay.
Another book party back in my hometown in Southern Oregon. So.
Oh, very good. Very good. Well, we will continue to follow you. And book can be purchased on Amazon. Best place to find it?
Yeah, Amazon is great. Barnes & Noble has it. And you can actually order it from your local bookstore as well.
Okay.
You can go to bookshop.org. That's a good way as well.
Okay. Well, Jens Heycke, author of Out of the Melting Pot into the Fire, congratulations on your book launch tonight, and congratulations on a fabulous book. I'm excited to see it in the hands of our young minds. So thank you for what you're doing, and make sure you go to your Twitter account and post that feature focusing on I have it right here, the high school tournament event schedule and how it separates the unidentified coaches. You need to highlight